Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Unsatisfying.
I'm sorry.
Not on you.
Sorry. You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Welcome back.
Sorry, I started laughing because you literally said something in your normal voice and then you went to podcast voice. And it was just such a switch.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's the only, I think we talked about, that's the only instance where I identified that I code switch.
Mm-hmm.
It's the podcast.
And it's really just the intro.
Yeah, it is. I think I sound exactly the same now as I always do. If not a little nicer. I also realized I meant to bring in all of my books that I have acquired in the last week. Because I promise everyone that this is
the episode, not another essay.
Nope. This is the last one. This is Alcatraz Part 3. And I promise that
Alcatrazing.
I promise that I have stayed on topic. I don't promise that there's not going to be bonus episodes. Because there will be. I won't make you sit through them if you don't want to. I can find guest co-hosts to do the bonuses.
No, I'm enjoying it. I just think it's funny.
But
we're not an Alcatraz podcast.
I have fully embraced this as like my new.
Your new.
This is my Roman Empire. This is.
See, I don't get the Roman Empire thing. I'm just not up on that trend.
Do you know what it means?
No.
It's just a thing where they say like, if you ask Shelton how often he thinks about the Roman Empire, and it's just something apparently where everyone realized that men think about the Roman Empire a lot for some reason.
Okay.
And I think a lot of women...
I was thinking more on, like, the whole, taking over and, like, expanding
yeah, that too.
thing. And I was just like, I don't know, like, the two references I've seen to the Roman Empire as, like, this trending thing, I'm like, I don't understand what this means and, like, where this is coming from, what spawned this, and, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the situation or, like, the context clues.
Yeah. I don't know where it came from.
Are not lining up with, like, it's like, oh, what is this version of the, like, I think it was, like, what is the woman's version of the Roman Empire? Yeah, I was going to say,
women are trying to figure out our version. And I don't think we have one. Because I've heard several suggestions. Like, one woman said, like, ancient Egyptian... like ancient Egypt, and I was like, no, that wasn't ever really a thing for me.
I did always enjoy ancient Egypt, but I don't think about it often anymore.
Yeah, and like I asked Jarek, and he said his is less Roman Empire and more, what did he say? I want to say like Middle Ages, or his is similar.
For me, it's time travel, I think, because I get in like arguments in my brain about time travel. And it's like, okay, so if time travel, exists, or like if, somebody were to go back in time and do this and like change things, and, how does that alter? So that's my little, my mind randomly will wander to this topic, every couple of months to, a couple times a year max. And I'll spend like a good hour pondering it and then move on and return to my normal life.
I think for me, it's the closest thing I can compare my current Alcatraz situation to is Vincent van Gogh. In college, in high school and college, I was really, really, really into Vincent van Gogh. You can look at my bookshelf in my parlor and see my collection, my vast collection. I did my senior thesis on him. it's almost like a little itch in my brain that I have to just keep learning everything I possibly can until I've just kind of satisfied it. And that's kind of what this feels like.
That's how I was about factory farming.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
It's the part of what a major part of what my job was.
Oh, I thought
I was fighting against factory farming.
Oh, okay.
And the pollution to our rivers because of factory farming.
That's awesome that was your job, though.
Yeah.
I would love for this to be my job. Yeah. I mean, I do tell people at my
you could
office about
move
it.
to San Francisco and become a docent.
There's a curator
called.
Situation there, and
which, by the way, you did my homework for me, so I didn't do it.
That's okay. I didn't find out necessarily about overnight stuff. I just found out we could do a behind-the-scenes tour that includes a night tour for about $100, which seems incredibly reasonable to me.
Yeah.
And
I can afford that.
Yeah. And I found a virtual tour of the dungeon cells, which will be in the show notes, which is very cool and also, very upsetting. And, yeah. Also, no one has written biographies about half the people I want to learn about, so, that could be a job for me. I have a lot of ideas. So...
This is your entire personality now.
It really is. I'm trying not to make it, but...
Forget the Roman Empire. This is
it.
This is your personality.
And now I have to go out tomorrow and come up with a new topic for an episode that's not this. So, thoughts and prayers, everyone. And on that topic... My one announcement, which I'm sure I should have written down other announcements that are not this. I have a correction for myself. For 2 episodes ago, because...
The OG Alcatraz.
The OG Alcatraz episode. The one that started it all. Because supplemental to my research, aka as I was taking breaks in this research, my own little personal projects, I was just reading more on Sam Shockley. He will be a bonus episode, I told Katy before we started recording. And I realized that the source I used for the Battle of Alcatraz, a lot of it came from a book written by Ernie Lageson's son. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it was coming from information from the guard's perspective. Mm-hmm. And what I have found out from a couple other sources, one of them, by the way, is an autobiography from an inmate who was there. He wasn't part of it. He was just in D block for the whole thing. Very interesting. I have a library copy of the book, and it's a signed copy.
Can you buy it?
I asked the library that, and they said no. They said technically you could keep it and buy it that way, but we don't encourage that. I was like, well...
What if I bought a copy on Amazon and gave you that one?
That's actually a good idea. I should offer to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to offer. I'm going to call them back. Jarek, remind me tomorrow to do that. Okay. Okay. Anyways, according to several other sources, Sam Shockley was not really an instigator in getting Kreutzer to shoot the guards. I think what I said was Sam told him, shoot the guards. There's one still alive. Make sure you shoot him. Every other account I've read said that Sam wasn't doing that. He was just kind of, he was chaotic and running around, but he wasn't actively trying to get anyone killed. Yeah. And that I think the book that I was reading that was the guy that was actually there said he's not quite sure if he remembers if he was even, he was there with us. I don't remember if he was with us when we heard those shots or if he was there right afterwards, but I'm almost positive that he couldn't have been there, encouraging that to happen. And then also apparently from the personality types of Kreutzer being kind of the career criminal he was not the kind of person who would be taking orders from someone,
especially who's been a little off
the
handle.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that just because I felt bad, and also I did read a little mini biography blog about Sam, and I'm just even more devastated about his life. And I didn't want to permanently put out there false information. So anyways, that's my correction.
Sam Shockley is a hill you're going to die on.
I will die on the Sam Shockley hill. Don't you worry. And he's not unproblematic, so I'll go.
Well, he was in Alcatraz, so
true. And he, spoiler alert for the bonus episode, married a 13-year-old girl when he was like 25.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a lot. That's a big problem.
You know, there's that. All right.
That's like Jerry Lee Lewis level.
Yeah.
Problematic.
But also,
at least she wasn't his cousin, right?
Yeah, but also he has the mental age of a 10-year-old, so gray areas.
So problematic for her too, because she obviously was more mature.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas that don't make sense. I feel like I found out something else interesting, but I don't remember what it was at all. It'll come to me in the middle of the episode, I'm sure. All right, Alcatraz, Part 3, aka the promised episode. So, conditions at Alcatraz by the 1960s, which is where we are starting, had actually improved since...
Well, because Warden Dumbass wasn't there anymore,
yes,
right?
Warden Dumbass is gone, thankfully.
Building.
So, in the 1940s, mid-1940s, painting was introduced as an option for the inmates.
Therapy.
Yeah.
I like art therapy.
Like, shockingly, they were like, what happens if we actually allow the inmates to do something, nice? In 1946, a local muralist named George Harris volunteered to teach a painting class at the prison, and it was successful enough that eventually some of the inmates' works were entered into the San Francisco annual open-air art show, and collectively they earned $200 in profits, which was about $2,500 in today's money.
See, I feel like there definitely are those like experimental prisons that, they don't have the fences. Like, technically, yes, the prisoners could run away.
Yeah.
But they are like way out there. Mm-hmm. So, and they're also like not dangerous, violent criminals. Yeah. They are the, low on the totem pole crimes with short sentences.
Yeah.
So it's like, really, it's just worth it to just stay here, do your time.
Yeah.
Like, it's a decent place. It's still a prison. Like,
yeah.
it's still a punishment. Like,
yeah.
you're not at a resort or anything. I would love to learn more about those experimental prisons, but also I want to learn more about prisons that do have, like, specifically, like, art therapy programs.
Yeah.
Not just offering classes or, like, GED classes, which I think is great and important. Like, absolutely offer continuing education.
Yeah.
Give them opportunities to do better, to be better when they get out.
Yes.
It's not a reward to have an art class in prison.
No.
It's an opportunity to, maybe someone is talented and maybe, they could. Mm-hmm. Odds are slim on that. But at the very least, I would love to know the statistics of, things like fights or prison riots or just behavioral issues.
Yeah. What
are the rates?
Yeah.
Before and after you introduce some sort of art therapy, music therapy, or you don't even have to call it therapy, just by offering, these sort of creative classes.
Yeah.
I would love to know if the instances of, violence or fights or just any kind of misbehaving and whatnot would decrease, because in my mind, it absolutely would.
Yeah. Well, it's so frustrating is, like, all of these quotes you hear from before this where they're like, oh, Alcatraz, like, we always need a place like Alcatraz. It's, a place for these people that can't be helped. And it's like, well, you're not really doing anything to help them. Like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. You're taking these people that you are saying can't be helped, and then you're putting them into a situation
and you're not helping,
where you're, like, making them worse. You're actively making them worse. And then you're being like, see, they can't be helped. And it's like, well, why don't you try something? And then they did. And
lo and behold,
shockingly, these human beings, like, responded. And this is a quote from Harris, the art teacher. He said, a couple, at least, would never have gotten mixed up with crime if they'd taken up art. Which I love as an art history major. Some will never have any trouble making a living as commercial illustrators if they get the chance. One or two could even become fine artists if they wished.
See, and that's the thing. It's like, yeah, likely most of these guys could not make it as an artist out in the real world, even with, like, all of the advantages and like, nothing working against them. But there are a few that probably could, as you said, get jobs as illustrators. There's lots of jobs and opportunities that people could use artistic skills towards.
Yeah.
And for those who aren't artistic, like myself, I am not a painter. I cannot draw. I do not paint well. It would still be a good form. Like, this creative expression would still be good for my mental state.
Yeah. Especially if your other options are sit in your cell. Yeah. Okay, so that was the 1940s when that was introduced. They also began to introduce movies. Those began to be allowed every other weekend in the chapel. They were not allowed to watch any gangster movies or sexy movies. I don't know what that means, but couldn't watch them.
I was thinking rom-coms, so like maybe some like Three Stooges, just regular comedies.
They were like comedies, and I want to say they said westerns, which I guess that doesn't count as crime. But
it doesn't glorify the criminals. It glorifies the good guys.
Yeah. I'm sure if there were any ones that glorified the outlaws, they would be like, not for them. Only general population was allowed to watch these. So if you were on D Block, you couldn't watch them.
It's still a prison.
Still a prison. You still got punished for being...
Yeah, you're in D Block because you broke the rules or you did something.
Yeah,
so
or you were, inconvenient in some way or had a mental illness. In 1955, radio outlets were installed in the cells, and inmates were allowed to listen to 2 approved stations, which were mostly music, but sometimes they got to listen to Major League Baseball. Which, again, I'm like, I was so impressed by these rules. I was like, wow, baseball. Sounds super boring to me, but...
My step-grandmother loved watching... She didn't care about baseball, loved watching the Atlanta Braves. Mm-hmm. Hated the TV announcers. So she would put the TV on, turn it on mute, and put the radio on and listen to the radio announcers. And the radio was in the kitchen, but the TV was in the living room. So she would be, like, doing stuff. Like, she was just kind of all over the house. So she could be, like, kind of watching and kind of hearing.
Yeah, that's
or
smart.
Listening, but not even seeing. I don't know.
Better hope that your TV wasn't slower than your radio. Mm-hmm. I guess that's less of a problem then than now. But our streaming services are always, you never know.
Oh, yeah.
So they got to listen to the radio, and then their visitation with family. They got to also see friends now. Close friends, not like any friends. And still like vetted by the FBI. This was extended from 40 minutes to 2 hours. You got 2 hours. Still only once a month, but...
Well, if you can be 2 hours there, that makes the whole process definitely more worth it for the visitors.
And definitely more worthwhile if you are driving... up or like traveling a long distance, because like someone mentioned it's once a month, so like unless you're timing them to come like at the end of the month, like you're coming on the 30th and the 1st, so you're getting in like 2 visits at once, back to back. Otherwise that's a long time to go in between visits, like a month. Like I'm driving up once a month to spend 40 minutes with you. Better really like you. All right, I'm going to jump right into our characters of the story. So you can look at your dossier.
There it is.
Which you've already seen our first character because he is featured on our bottle of wine.
19 credits.
Mr. Frank Morris was born September 1st, 1926. I have a little bit more background on Frank than I do on the others. So Frank's mother was named Clara, and she was a chronic runaway starting at the age of 11. She's also kind of a piece of shit, so don't feel bad for her that much. She gives birth to Frank when she is 17, and she pretty immediately gave him up to foster care, like, understandably. Mm-hmm. But after a year, he was returned to her while she was in training school, which, like, she asked for him back. And she was doing well enough. What'd you find?
Occupation, an escape artist.
I know, right? I love the shit they put on there. It was noted that while she had Frank, she treated him more as a toy or an accessory than she did as a child. So after a short time...
It's unfortunate that a lot of women actually do that.
Yeah. I mean, she's like 18 at this point and kind of not someone who's had a stable life herself.
New Orleans.
Yeah, he did a lot of crime in New Orleans.
A lot of people have done a lot of crime in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's true. He was born, by the way, in D.C. So after a short time, Clara went to work as a nanny, and she left Frank in an orphanage at that point. So she's like, I'm going to go take care of some other kids and leave my own behind. So Frank is raised in an orphanage. I think he eventually goes to a foster family. And Clara would visit him periodically, but her visits just got less and less frequent. And, like, it becomes apparent that she's, like... The scene that was painted to me was, like every time she's visiting, she's, like, looking more and more, like, not ragged, but just, like, she's wearing, like, cheap party clothes and, like... It just looks like she's
getting
come
deeper into a certain lifestyle.
Yes, and she always brings him like a bag of cheap candy as like a gift, and like he doesn't ever know who she is because like by the time he's like 4, he's seen her like a handful of times, and he's like, who the f*** is this woman, and why does she want me to hug her? Yeah, so it's just like chaotic and upsetting for him. But he like appeared to be like doing well in foster care. His foster mother said of him, quote, while he gives the impression of being rough, he's really quite gentle and timid, and his blustering manner is only assumed. Which I think is, I don't know why I find that so endearing of a child. And his teacher said, quote, I really don't like to reprimand him because he's such a nice boy.
Aww,
which I'm just
poor
like,
little Frankie.
Little Frankie. However, the sporadic visits from his mother were having a pretty negative effect on him.
Oh, for sure. That's why, like, I don't know. I gotta be careful. I don't want to talk too much because I don't know enough. But I've always wanted to adopt. And I want to go, like, the foster to adopt route because I want the kid to choose us back. Yeah. But I know that, like, the goal, or, like, my understanding is, like, the goal of foster is reunification. Yeah. Or, like, reuniting families. And so a lot of kids in the foster system are not up to be, adopted because the hope is that their parents will get clean, get jobs, just do whatever that they have to do in order to be able to have their kids back. Yeah. And I've got real mixed feelings on that. And like, toxic people are toxic people, and, like... like, it would be great if, you know...
and it's, like, in a perfect world, it would be great for people like you guys to be the foster system, right? To have, like, stable homes and to have the best intentions of, like, wanting to provide a great life for a child.
That's the other part of it is also there's a lot of foster families out there that are just in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, you think of the foster system and you don't think of good things.
It's bad on both ends. It's like, it's bad to be in the foster system, but being with their family, like their actual parents, is also bad. Yeah. And it's like, no, I don't want, some kid to be bounced around from house to house where they're not cared for. Yeah. But I also don't want these toxic people coming back into their lives regularly and being like, imagine like a 7-year-old or something, old enough to understand what's going on, but not fully understand everything and know that, like, oh, I'm gonna go back and live with my mom one day. She just, she just has to do this stuff, Yeah. But, like, every time mom visits or whatever, it just leaves negative impacts on the kids, and they're like, well, why can't I go be with mom again? Or like,
and I'm sure it's hard. I mean, I've never been in that situation, but I'm sure it's so hard to try to understand why your parent would be choosing anything over you, would be choosing anything that would cause, you know, you to be taken away from them.
I mean, even the kids that are, you know, given up for adoption, even if they are adopted, like, there's still that, like, why didn't my parents want me? It's like, it doesn't matter how wanted you are by your family. There's still going to be that part of you wondering what's wrong with me.
Yeah. It's so sad. I know. Jeez.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Tangent. There's just like adoption, like fostering, like basically children feeling unwanted, and then also like prison reform.
I know.
Well, two of my biggest like passions, and like, oh.
Well, and like, I mean, part of the reason that I'm like so badly want to know like the backgrounds of everyone. I want to know. I'm like, how did you get here? How did you? Yeah. And like with Frank, it makes. I'm like, well, this tracks 1,000%. This makes so much sense, and I hate that it makes sense, but it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess if you're just stuck in the system, and you didn't, I mean,
system's broken.
Yeah, and he doesn't have. I mean, spoiler alert, he doesn't get adopted by anyone. He just stays in the system, and
probably gets progressively worse. And therefore less adoptable.
Yeah, and like the older you get,
and then also nobody wants older kids. I do. I want the older kids.
Yeah.
I want like the 13-year-olds, like not in a creepy way. But I want the older kids because I know what it's like to be that age and feel unloved and unwanted. And I don't want any kid to feel that.
Yeah. So people began to know, like teachers and whatever, began to notice that around the times of his mom's visits is when he would start acting up. So he began stealing things. He would start with small things. It would be like spare change from the teacher's desk, or he would steal, one of the examples was like an orange from a girl's lunchbox, even though he already had an orange of his own. He just... You know, just stealing for stealing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, you know, the petty crimes like that are not for...
Yeah, it's not because he needed it.
Yeah.
He did show... I only found one example of this, that he showed some abusive tendencies towards animals, and it was only that he violently threw a cat into a puddle one time. But this was told in the context of he had... been made to live on a farm. They thought that moving him to a farm was going to help with his behavior.
Potentially, but like if it's done right.
Yeah. But he was visibly very scared of the horses on the farm. Horses are very scary. They're very large.
And intimidating animals. Just ask Olive. Our dog is terrified of them. Jory loves them. He's like, hi, big ponies.
I think,
or big puppies. That's it.
I forget how big horses are until I'm around them.
It also depends on the breed of horse.
True. And the temperament of the horse.
You're like, oh, hi, pretty horse. And then you see, like, the big police horse, and you're like, oh, hi, elephant horse.
Never mind.
I won't do any crimes, I swear.
I promise I won't do any crimes.
Dude, you've not seen scary horses until you've seen... All right, I'm sure you've seen videos of Mardi Gras and how, like, in parades and how, like, thick the crowds are. Like, there's no personal space.
Yeah. Sounds like a nightmare.
Until you've seen a horse charge through a crowd.
Oh, jeez.
Watch a cop, like, basically horse collar somebody and then drag them back out and, like, all but throw them on the hood of the police car for the buddies.
Oh, my gosh.
Essentially, it was some obviously underage kid who...
You're doing that to a child?
Well, not like a child, but, like, he's... 18 or something.
Okay.
17 maybe.
Still young. What's he doing?
Drunk.
Oh, okay.
Carrying a like half...
Oh, underage in that term. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking underage, like under 18 child.
Under 21.
Under 21. Okay.
He is like drunk and like stumbling and the, you know, police officer's like, hey, stop. When you talk, like, hey, come here, buddy, come here. All right, come on, you. He grabs him. I mean, he doesn't actually like, violently throw him.
Yeah.
It's just he grabbed him by the collar to grab him and then steered him and the horse back to...
Horse is big.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't want to see that.
But yeah, I was just like in the crowd watching all this. I wasn't even that close to it. Like, to where the, like...
Did people just move out of the way for
Mm-hmm.
the horse?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez. I mean, lucky, I guess. Horse can run you over.
Well, because at this point, the officer has been yelling from horseback at this kid for quite some time now, so everyone nearby is able to be like, hold on, let's stop watching the parade and pay attention to the guy up on the horse.
Yeah, who's much taller than us.
Yeah, like, oh, and the horse is moving, okay. Get out of the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, Frank was very scared of the horses on the farm. And apparently he was, like, ashamed of the fact that he was scared of the horses. So possibly he felt like he had to...
Be tough.
Yeah, be tough and
compensate.
Compensate. That's the word. So, 1937 was the last time his mother ever visited him. So he was 11. And he would later eventually tell the FBI that that was the year that she died. Like, he would just say, I was orphaned when I was 11. My parents died when I was 11. And he never knew his father. I don't know that his mom knew who his father was. She named him after a guy that she claimed she was married to, but, like, who knows what was happening. So he's like, whatever. Claire's gone. He's 11. His small little petty crimes soon escalate. And by the age of 13, he is convicted of theft. Why we're arresting and convicting 13-year-olds, I don't know. Seems a little much, but that's what we're doing. So he's convicted of theft, and he is sent to the National Training School for Boys in Northeast D.C. for a 6-year, 9-month sentence, which sounds just like until he's 18. But he was released on parole after less than a year. And then less than a year after that, he was back in another reform school for violating his parole. And from there, he was in and out of reform schools and eventually prison when he was old enough for prison. His charges ranged from burglary, larceny of an automobile, possession of marijuana. Love that for him.
On there it said narcotics.
Marijuana is what they mean.
It's like,
Just marijuana, not real narcotics. Federal theft and then bank robbery is what eventually gets him in the big prison. He escaped from multiple reform schools, jails, and prisons, and then eventually...
Hence his occupation as escape artist.
Yes. He eventually ended up at Alcatraz in 1960. I don't know if you noticed on his intake paperwork, but it did note that he was of, quote, superior intelligence.
I saw his IQ was 133.
133, yes. You can take a sip, because that was my next point.
I was thorough in reading that.
Good. I tried to do a tiny bit of research on IQs. What I'm going with is average is between 85 and 115. What they are technically calling, like, genius is around 140-ish.
Okay, I always thought average was like 125, but maybe not.
Well, unclear. I read an article on, like, it's like Business Insider. I thought it was going to be about IQs, but then it was like, here's a bunch of people with the highest IQs. It was a list of all men. And I was like, you Business Insider. Anyways, there's a Wikipedia article on it that's a little unclear. The point is that he was
very
smart. He was smarter than your average
bear.
Probably smarter than us.
So I think, yeah.
Okay.
We're pretty smart.
I mean, we are. I don't think I'm IQ smart, though. I'm terrible at IQ tests. And, like, reading through the stuff that he came up with, and I think that's part of one of the reasons that I'm, like, fascinated by him. I'm just like, I don't know. You're so smart.
Well, there's different types of intelligence, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You've got both. I feel like you've got the book smart and the street smart. I've got the, I don't know.
Well, there's also things like emotional intelligence.
We'll go with that. I've got the emotional.
Well, I mean, that's a legitimate thing.
Yeah, I've got the emotional intelligence. Jared has the street smarts.
It's not even just your own emotions. It's not... It's understanding those around you, and like that kind of plays into empathy and whatnot. Basically, there's lots of different types of intelligence.
You know what? Between all of us, we make the Captain Planet guy.
That's right. I was always I used to joke that was my, I was talking to a college professor when I was like, I'm interested in, switching to this university and, being in this academic program. And at one point he's like, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I was like, Captain Planet. Or wearing a tie-dye lab coat.
Nice.
Yeah. Those are my goals.
Did you ever do that? Tie-dye your lab coat?
I never had a lab coat.
Oh.
I mean, I could, the closest thing to a lab coat that I really would have had were chest waders. And they never came in, white or light colors to tie-dye. They're always, browns and grays because...
Unfortunate.
You're generally in the mucky water. So.
We'll get you a tie-dye lab coat one day.
I accidentally ran one of Shelton's lab coats through the wash with a pin in it. And so there was one or two small little ink stains, and he was like, don't worry about it, I have to order new coats anyway. And I was like, I'm gonna tie-dye this bad boy.
Yes.
Just to have it.
I like it. All right, so Frank gets to Alcatraz in 1960, not...
In 1960?
1960. And he immediately is thinking of how to get out, because that's what you do.
When you're not in painting class, or maybe even when you are in painting class, what else do you do with your time?
Yeah, you just start
fantasize about escape.
Yeah. And by the fall of 1961, he had begun putting together an actual concrete plan, pun intended.
So he'd been there for about, a year and a half at that point? Because I think it said he got in at January 20th.
Yeah.
I focused.
You did really read his... Yeah, good job. Yeah, so he'd been in about a year and a half, and he's been, observing the whole time. He's kind of doing a Bernard Coy, but, smarter. And
I don't know, Bernard, he was savvy.
He was just more, I don't know. He was more hot-headed, I feel like.
Well, also, I think the Bernard Coy Alcatraz is a different beast than the Frank Morris Alcatraz.
And Coy picked some very different people to join him than Frank is going to pick. So, there's that.
Coy went with, convenience.
Yeah, Coy went with...
as opposed to...
Coy went with, muscle.
Well, and again, this was when... Coy was when... they weren't allowed to talk, so he wasn't really able to get to know.
He was, right at the tail end of that, I think. Yeah.
So, it was probably a struggle to actually get to know his accomplices versus talk freely.
True, yeah. And, I mean, Frank has a lot more freedom to do a lot more stuff. So he's flying under the radar, not getting into trouble. Just
be a good inmate,
just
head
observing.
down, I'm just here to do my time and get out.
Yes, exactly. So he had noticed that in his cell there was a vent underneath the sink. And I'm going to try to explain this the best that I can. I will go ahead and say, for everyone listening, you can go to, I think I'll look at my notes really quick and tell you exactly what you can go to. You can go to FBI.gov and just look at all of the pictures. I'm not going to share all of them because I got a little freaked out by their warning where they're like, don't share any of these without permission. Well, they haven't done a great job of documenting. Everything is really unorganized. But I'm going to try really hard to explain the setup the best that I can. Okay, so in his cell, underneath his sink, there's a grate that's kind of recessed into the wall. So he noticed one day that he could chip away at some of the concrete with a nail file that he had. So they got nail clippers and it had a nail file attachment to it. So he's like, okay, plan is formulating. He measured the thickness of the wall using a thin piece of wood that he cut in the shop and then put in his belt. I'm assuming on the inside of his belt. It was really thin piece of wood, put it in his belt. Got it back to his cell because they're only going through metal detectors. So you can kind of smuggle things that aren't metal. And also they're not checking you. They're only doing random pat downs. So one guy was like, you got 40% chance of getting through with something. So he used the stick. He, like, stuck it through the grate and kind of guesstimated how thick the wall was. He got about 8 inches. He was like, okay, I figured that out. And then he began checking out books from the library on structural engineering. And he, like, started reading up on, like, concrete and cement and how it worked. That's what I'm saying. He's like, I wouldn't think to do that. Nor would I have the patience to. I would get to that part of the plan and then I'd be like...
You're in prison. You'll have the patience.
I know, but I would get to that part of the plan and then be like, I'm bored. Can I get my other book back? Can I get my fiction book back? So he also realized that he was going to need to do something to hide whatever work he was doing on this grate while he was working on it. So he decided that he was going to get a piece of cardboard and paint it to look like the grill. But they don't have cardboard, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to, like, find cardboard or ask for it, he decides he's going to make his own cardboard. He's got, like, a whole... I don't know how
this guy's my spirit animal.
He's like...
He is 100%. Did I tell you that in high school, before Katrina at my private school, I used to send the second half of my lunch breaks? Mm-mm. So the first half, like, we had an hour. First half, I'd go and I'd eat and, you know, suffer talking to people for a little bit. And then, especially, you know, sometimes another friend of mine and we would go to the library and we would go to the nonfiction stacks and we would just pick a random book. You know, like, sometimes we might go back and be like, oh, I was reading this one yesterday. I want to read some more. Or, like, I have an actual interest. Let's go find something from here. But we would just pick random books. And I would just read randomly about...
You do so well in prison.
I really would, though.
You would.
Or, also, I've also been lately fantasizing about being, like, stranded on a deserted island. Oh. Like, Lost style.
You fantasize about that.
Because I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not a hunter, but I am a crafter. And, like, I would love figuring out how to make all the things.
Yeah, like problem-solving stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where Critter gets it from. Yeah. It's from me.
I can see that aspect of, like, okay, I have all the time in the world and limited resources. How can I problem-solve this
How can I make cardboard? So, like, you said that, I'm like, okay. Well, when he said he didn't have cardboard, I was like, well, he does have sheets. Like, what about, you know, pillowcases?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to make a guess on how he's going to make cardboard?
Is he gonna, like, slowly steal sheets of paper from books in the library and make a, like, basically you tear up the paper, mix it with water, make a paper pulp, and then, because I've made paper before. If this cardboard is just thicker paper.
Yep. That's exactly what he does. Except he's taking advertisements from magazines.
Okay. So. Well, that's good because he might need those books, and other people in the future might need those books too.
Yep. You
I am ready for prison.
I know. You could have been on this escape team.
Told you, I've been fantasizing about being stranded on a desert island.
Also,
I want to learn. I have literally... So this is my ADHD showing right now. I have watched videos a couple of times, like the same series a couple of times now, on how to, like, from seed to fabric, making linen. So, like, literally growing the flax, harvesting the flax, processing the flax, turning it into thread, and then weaving it and turning it into linen.
See, I didn't even know what linen was made out of. I would have guessed cotton. I also have a smut prompt for you later in this episode.
Okay.
So, not of my own making, just I feel like someone came up with this and it has to be fantasy. Okay, so more of this planning. He also has decided that he is going to need a dummy head so that once he gets to the part of his plan where he has a hole in the wall and he needs to go do other stuff, he can have something that makes it look like he's sleeping in his bed and the guards are not going to notice that he's gone. Because he understands that this is not just a dig a hole through the wall and you're out. He's like, there's more parts to this and I'm going to need a way to leave my cell without anyone noticing I'm gone. And at this point, he decides that he needs to bring in some other people for logistical reasons. He, I think, originally wanted to do it by himself because that's safer.
Yep.
So he needed a lookout while he's digging, obviously. And then he would need help getting some of the materials. So he needed hair from the barbershop for the dummies. Eventually, he was going to make a raft, so he was going to need raincoats. He was going to need paint, glue, all of these things. Just going to be easier if you had a couple other people involved.
And also, like, if he's slowly collecting and accumulating, like, that could raise some suspicions.
Spread it out over a couple.
If he's, like, randomly going to the barbershop, like, regularly, and it's like, you don't need a haircut every couple of days.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if one of the guys works in the barbershop, and if another guy
pocket a tuft of hair every day, and whatever.
And then if another guy is in the painting class, which is like essentially what they did. One of the guys worked in the barbershop. One of the guys took a painting class. Another guy he like worked in an area where he could get the raincoats. Like they all just split it up really well.
I imagine someone was in like laundry or something.
I don't really know.
That's where I would get the raincoats, right?
Yeah, I don't really know. They said something about working in the basement with the raincoats. I don't know. Okay, so our next person, your next picture, I think. Wait, hold on. Let me check. Give me your dossier. I think I put these out of order. I did. I know I put them out of order. All right. So the first person he calls in is Alan West. Alan was 30 years old and from New York City.
Got cute big ears. Little sticky outy ears.
So he was in the cell right next to Morris. So that's how they knew each other. He was really talkative.
It's a good lookout.
Yeah.
And he could probably sit there and talk like he's talking to Frank, who's laying in bed, but it's really the dummy.
Yeah. And Frank was like quiet. Frank didn't talk. And so that was perfect, right?
Like, you talk, I'll listen.
But I'm
not listening.
And if you already like established that as a habit, then it's like, nice.
Guards walking by are like, oh, it's just old Chatty McGee over there just talking Frank's ear off.
Yeah. So he was serving 10 years for car theft. He had previously served time on 3 different prison farms. He played the accordion, which...
Gotta love a well-rounded criminal.
This is my least favorite fact of the entire 3 episodes. He had recently spent some time in the hole for taking part in a staged distraction that allowed another inmate to stab some other guy. That's not the fact. But while he was in the hole, he participated in a protest that unfortunately I had to read 3 pages of details about. And trigger warning for just anyone. I forgot about this. During this protest, which I think was they were protesting the suppression of petitions in court. So like, I don't know, prison officials were not letting their petitions go to court, which is something you should protest. Maybe not in this way. Several inmates were slashing and severing their Achilles tendons. Just right through that tendon. I don't know how you do that.
Hurt.
I know, right? Like, don't you just grab your ankle?
I hate that movie, House of Wax. The remake that in Paris Hilton and
probably
Chad Michael Murray. I think it's the one where like she's walking and it's House of Wax and like the scissors come up through the grate and snip the
I can't do anything with
I'm not big on gore
and heel, like anything with your heel. I can't. But listen, when I tell you
there's also when she had her finger like wiggle and he just took the wire cutters and snipped the tip of stuff like that. It's like little things. I'm too empathetic.
Oh yeah, you feel it when so like that's why you grabbed your ankle when I said that.
Silly gore, not silly, like.
But like
ridiculous gore. I'm just like, oh, that's crazy. A tree root just burst through your chest. But like relatable gore.
None of that.
Like I empathize. I can I can feel it. I imagine what that would be like. Somebody getting like a meat hook through their shoulder.
Oh,
I feel it.
Why'd you just say that?
Because
sore shoulders.
Because my shoulder really hurts.
I'm gonna talk about the. Take a glance back for comfort.
What's up, boys? My friends.
Yeah.
Hey, Teddy.
Right. Anyways.
So he slashed his own Achilles tendon.
He slashed both of his. Some of the guys only slashed one. With like a razor, with a single razor, he got in deep enough to sever his Achilles tendon.
How long is the recovery on? Like, because
I asked my sister that, and she just said you got to stay off of it for a little while. And then I think for the one that Alan was involved in, they're like in the dungeon, right? They do this, and then I don't know when they're discovered, but they get taken up to
the medical
surgery. Ward. They get like fixed, tied back up, or whatever, and then they throw them back down there. And then guards go down there and beat the shit out of them because they want to know how they got the razors. So, like, Alan West is down there in 2 casts with sewn together tendons.
This hurts so
and
much.
He, like, gets the shit beat out of him because he's not going to tell the guards how he got a razor blade. By the way, it was through the toilet system. But it's the answer to it.
I'm no longer afraid of snakes or gators in the toilet, but razor blades.
But, like... Anyways, I had to put that fact in for everyone.
No, you didn't.
I did. I had to read about it.
We don't all have to suffer with you.
Yes, you do.
It's your fault for being obsessed with Alcatraz and the horrors that is this place.
Anyways, this also, I think I was reading this like on the, that was going to be a terrible pun, on the heels of, on the heels of the Aaron Rodgers injury, where he tore his Achilles tendon. I was just really thinking a lot about just heel injuries.
You know, you making us suffer really makes you quite a heel.
I'm so sweaty right now. Is anyone else sweaty? Are you?
No,
hot?
I'm still queasy, and you're not making it better.
I'm gonna move on. I'm
Please
gonna tell you about
do.
the Anglin brothers, okay? They're nicer.
Are they in my next?
Yeah, you actually get 2 pages for them because...
Alright, because they're brothers?
Well, yeah, but I put them... Just bear with me. So look at their first set of mugs, okay? So we have John Anglin and Clarence Anglin. John's older by a year. I have them as 31 and 30. I might be off by a year. They're from Donaldson, Georgia. They come from a large family. There's 14 children in their family.
Jeez.
I know. They're farmers. I don't know why I said that. Like, that makes...
No,
it makes sense.
It does.
But...
Typically, especially at this time, and earlier, it made more sense, to have more hands to help around the farm.
True. Farm hands.
Yeah.
Hilarious. We're great on puns today. I wish the heel ones weren't so prominent. Okay, look at the next page because I just want you to show you their other mugshots. Do those look like the same people to you? Also, this is the most used one that I found of Clarence. I feel like they did him so dirty with that.
Look at all these beautiful mugs.
I know. These are not bad ones, but he clearly blinked in his Alcatraz mugshot, and they were just like, we're keeping this. That's the one they put out for all of his, like, at-large things. And then I don't feel like...
Really, it's the eyebrow.
Like, they couldn't have developed that photo and then been like, okay, Clarence, get out of your cell. We have to take your mugshot again. This looks terrible.
And he's just pouting.
He doesn't look like the same person in his picture. If someone had showed me these 2 pictures and been like, have you seen this person? I'd be like, which one?
Yeah.
I haven't seen either of them. Those look like 2 completely different people. He's a freaking chameleon. Okay. So, the Anglin brothers. So, every May, the Anglin family would go to Michigan to pick cherries. I guess Michigan is big on cherries.
All right.
While they were there, John and
Clarence.
John and Clarence learned to swim in the icy waters of Lake Michigan, which is important. And they were both known among their siblings to be very strong swimmers. And obviously cold water does not bother them. I don't know if that was known to Frank, but it's just a great fact. Clarence and John were also really close with their brother Al, and the three of them were like the troublemakers of the family. And it started out with things like skipping school and stealing watermelons, famously the most stolen fruit.
I don't know, man. Like, if Critter's gonna steal things, at this point it probably will be fruit. Because he freaking loves fruit.
Hey.
Also likes candy corn.
Fruit. Yeah, it's true. Lots of sugars.
He stole my candy corn today. What? Or, I mean, he had several on his tray, and I had, like, 3 in front of me. And he kept pointing at it and like, And I'm like, these are mine. And he's like, And I'm like, you have some there. And he was like, yeah, I do. Picked one up. He goes,
So what you're saying, though, is even though he had his own orange, he rifled through your tray and got yours. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, fruit stealing.
Yeah, but I'm his mom.
That's true.
So, like, obviously he wants I have a cup. Uh-huh. I've told you about my cup. It's just one of those, like, big tumblers with a straw that is, like, my daily. It's, like, a big cup. It helps keep me hydrated through the day. Mm-hmm. Before I leave to go pick him up, I have to hide it. Really? Because even if he sees it, like, if I just leave it out on the counter, you know, he can see up on the counter now, and he's like, puh, 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 because that's how he says cup. Uh-huh. And he has to have it.
Why? He's
obsessed.
Oh, okay.
His little water bottles that I bring when we go on adventures, I had to buy those special because I have the adult size of the exact same water bottles, and he had other cups, other sippy cups. Didn't want those sippy cups. He wanted Mom's water bottle, so I got him kid size.
That's adorable, though. Oh, man. Okay. So, they're stealing water bottles and...
watermelons.
I said water bottles. They're stealing water bottles and candy corns. And then that escalated to petty crime.
What's more petty than stealing water bottle?
I'll tell you. Breaking and entering. But they would break and enter closed businesses. So they would specifically, like...
Hence the breaking part.
Well, yeah, but they wouldn't go...
Otherwise, if the business is open, they were just entering.
That's true. I guess that's implied. So according to a book called Riddle of the Rock by Don DeNevy, quote, they never wanted confrontation. They had an aversion to violence and the possibility of hurting somebody. So they just wanted stuff. They didn't want to hurt anyone. They were in and out of jail.
They also probably wanted attention because... there was 14 children.
True, I know. Like, a lot. That's a lot happening. This is just like a couple Duggars committing crimes.
So, you mean like a couple of Duggars?
Yeah, but minor crimes.
Yeah.
Crimes that don't hurt people.
Fair. So they're better than the Duggars.
Yeah, so they're better than the Duggars. Oh, man.
No, let's be fair. They're better than certain Duggars.
They're better than certain Duggars, yes. Okay, so they're in and out of jail in the 1950s for various small crimes. They regularly escaped jails. They're also little escape artists. Their last heist was in 1958, and for some reason, they decided to do a bank robbery in Columbia, Alabama. Bank robberies famously take place during business hours. Kind of hard to break into them when they're closed. Everything's locked up. Anyways, I don't know why they decided to do this. And I guess they just really wanted the cash. But they decided to use a toy pistol because they thought even if they got caught, it was going to be a lesser charge because it wasn't armed.
Yes and no, because you're still threatening with a deadly weapon.
Yeah.
Even if the weapon actually isn't deadly, you have...
I know. I just think it's so sweet that they were like, we'll just use a toy gun. Because we don't want to hurt anyone. We just want the money.
See, what you really should go as for Halloween is a prisoner, but like one of those old-timey, just like in the striped pajamas, and just be, a prisoner.
I thought
advocate for prisoners' rights.
I thought of, currently, the current one that Jarek and I are on is TJ and Spinelli from Recess, because that would be easy and fun. But I'm not completely unsold on the idea of doing like a 1930s gangster, mostly because I like the idea that I would get to dress up as like
in a suit, like a pinstripe suit.
Well, he would dress up in the pinstripe suit, and then I would just get to be like the arm candy, and I'd get to wear like a pretty dress.
I would go with the suit too, with the fedora and the violin case.
In the suit though, I'm gonna wear a pretty dress, and then I could just buy a pretty dress to wear, and I could have like this. Well, is the cigarette holder still a 30s thing? I don't know.
I think so.
Or I could just dress up. I should just dress up as an Alcatraz prisoner and talk about this all night and annoy people. I will not do that, I promise. I'm planning games for the children. All right, so they made out with... Are you okay?
Sorry, I'm a 13-year-old boy. They made out, did they?
Maybe. No, they're brothers. They made out with $23,481, which is about $240,000. A lot of money. But it turns out the bank was federally insured, and so the FBI got involved and found them in Ohio, and they were all charged with armed robbery because of the reasons that you said. So they all initially get sent to a penitentiary in Atlanta. But then Clarence gets transferred to Leavenworth, which is like
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's like a maximum... I think it's like a maximum security. It's where a lot of prisoners from Alcatraz get sent from. So, like, a lot of people come from Leavenworth.
Maybe we mentioned it in the previous episode, and that's why... Like, I mean, I know I've heard of Leavenworth before.
Yeah.
It's a common one.
Yes. So Clarence gets transferred there first, and then John was transferred there later. The best I could find out was because officials thought that Al was a bad influence on him. They didn't want them to be together. I don't know. While John and Clarence are there together, Clarence tried to help John escape by smuggling him out in a shipping of bread. So like bread boxes. But he was caught. And so John gets sent to Alcatraz first because he's now an escape risk. So he goes to Alcatraz in October of 1960 to serve 15 years.
It said October 24th on his thing.
Okay.
It's my childhood friend's birthday.
You've got such a good memory. You'd be great. You'd be a great addition to this team. Make the trio
I would, actually.
You really would.
But also, my memory is great, but also terrible.
You'd be good for memorizing certain things.
Yeah. No. Ask Shelton about, like, earlier this week when we talked about stamps, and then he was at work and I went to the grocery store to do grocery shopping, and I talked to him at the pharmacy, and he was like, you can just buy stamps at the register. You don't have to go to the post office. Like, okay, great.
You can buy stamps at Publix?
And he was like, you can just get them at the register just when you're
amazing.
Paying for the groceries, ask for stamps. So I was like, cool, got it. I go directly from the pharmacy, like 30 feet to the open register, unload, have a pleasant chat with the cashier and the bag person, pay for my groceries, walk out the store.
Forgot the stamps.
Get home and realize, and then text Shelton that, of course, I forgot the mother flippin' stamps.
Well, you know what? Shelton can get them. He's still there.
He was still there for a little while.
Oh, man. Okay, so Clarence eventually is caught trying to smuggle a letter to someone in isolation. So he gets transferred to Alcatraz in January of 61 to serve a 10-year sentence. And this is a quote from one of John's ex-girlfriends, which is kind of heartbreaking to me. She said, quote, "They weren't bad guys. They were just dirt poor." Which I'm like, yeah, a lot of criminals are. They're not bad. They're just don't have the means of surviving like other people. All right, so Frank gets his group together. He explains the plan. And they began chipping away at the cement around the ventilation grates in their cells using the nail file attachment on their nail clippers. Frank and Clarence did the work first while John and Alan kept watch for them. Because Clarence and John obviously had, not obviously, but their cells were next to each other.
Okay.
And then once their holes were done... so like once the hole was big enough that the grate could come off and it was wide enough that they could fit through, the plan was they were going to switch so that John and Alan could do theirs. And eventually they graduated to using broken spoon handles, which they welded the file to. Frank used some kind of like silver melting welding technique that I cannot fully explain because I did not understand it because it was too technical for me.
Did he do it in the machine shop?
No, he just did it in his cell. He like made like a cone out of the matches, and I don't know. This 135 IQ is working 133 IQ. It's working overtime for him. Okay, it's like doing I don't know.
He's getting out.
He figured out how to weld the spoons and the whatever. So they would collect the shavings of the cement in their pockets because they didn't want to flush it down the toilet because they were like, that could clog the toilets. So they just collect them in their pockets, and then while they're out in the rec yard, they would just sprinkle them out, slowly empty them. So they made their paper mache and their cardboard from advertisements in magazines. They would cut them as close to the binding as possible. And they mentioned even if someone were to notice, all of their material was censored anyways. So possibly someone could think this is just something the censor took out, but not someone's cutting things out of magazines. So to make the cardboard, he did exactly what you said, which was soaked it in water, made it into a pulp, reformed it into cardboard, and then he cut that into the size and the shape of the grate, painted on the grate, like literally, it's amazing the way these things look. And he did this with paint that Clarence had ordered because Clarence was the one who was like in painting classes, and they literally, most of the stuff that they use, or a lot of the stuff they used, they ordered through the prison system. So like the prison is supplying them the stuff they need. It's amazing.
It's a way to really stick it to the prison.
I know.
So they were allowed to paint in their cells. They weren't only like, oh, you can only paint during painting hours, or did they smuggle it from the painting room to their cells?
They smuggled it.
Okay.
Yeah, but you could order like any colors that you wanted.
Yeah, well,
and stuff
that
like
makes sense. But again, like, yeah, I want these specific colors, but they're only there in the art room.
Yeah.
And you can only get to them during art class times.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just go in willy-nilly throughout the day.
Yeah. And again, because the metal detector is only checking for metal, and because you're only getting like patted down randomly, it was pretty easy to smuggle non-metal things back into your cell. As long as you're not doing something that's like getting caught with them, no one's really going to notice. So they also used some of the concrete dust, or like the residue, magazine pages, soap, and glue that they would steal from the brush shop to make like a plaster, and that's what they used to mold the heads. They're like fake heads. And then they used paint and hair from the barbershop, which Clarence collected because he worked in the barbershop, to make their dummy heads. And I think your next picture is a picture of the actual one of the dummy heads that
Is it gonna give me nightmares?
I don't know. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah, I might get nightmares, but that's impressive.
Yeah, and like, I tried to find a good one of the way that it was set up, because I think if you go to Alcatraz now, they have like a replica set up in the cell the way it was set up on the night. And you just imagine like the lights are dim.
Yep.
You're not really looking that hard. And
like for sure, even if like the paint wasn't chipped and whatnot there, if this was on the other side of the room and there was like a blanket, you know, and lumps and everything where it was supposed to be, wouldn't question it.
Yeah, I agree. It's really creepy.
They're really well done.
I know, it's creepy. So John was the one who was able to get them the raincoats. Like I said, he worked in a basement somewhere where the raincoats were, I guess. And the way he did it is he would just wear a raincoat out of work every day. And because the guard that saw him on the way out wasn't the same one that saw him coming in, they just assumed he had worn it coming in. So it was like, okay. So once they got through their grates, they were in like a utility corridor. And then they could climb the pipes up. And then there was like, I guess like a catwalk area, and then there was a caged off kind of area that couldn't be seen by anyone else. So they were going to use that area as their workshop. So that's where they kind of put everything, and that's where they were going to make a raft and water wings out of the raincoats. But before they started that, Frank wanted to make sure that they could get all the way up to the roof, like just to, you know, make sure.
Let's test the route.
Yeah. And he couldn't get all the way up through the ventilation raft on his own, so he had to wait for a chance for one of the other guys to go with him. So Clarence goes up with him as soon as he's able, and they discover that the shaft had a network of bars and a rain cap over the top of it that are like riveted down. And they're like, well, we've done all this work and now there's fucking rivets in the way. And they were like, a bar spreader isn't gonna work. Like, anyways. And this is where I was like, this IQ, man, this is like, I would have been like, okay, well, I guess we're done. Like, I guess we spent 6 months or whatever. No, Frank will not be deterred.
He's getting out.
He's getting out. So they stole I've seen two versions, either a broken fan or a broken vacuum cleaner motor. They get a motor of some kind. And they turn it into a drill. They get a drill bit that they've stolen. I don't know how they got it. I also don't know, by the way, I don't know how they got the spoons. They talk about getting the spoons. I don't know how they got those. I don't know if they quit counting the silverware.
That's what I was thinking, or assuming, that they no longer counted silverware.
I guess.
Or, yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know. I'm just assuming rules are more lax. But they just make their own drill. Because, of course, they do. You can do that. Frank truly should have been an engineer in another life.
This is where also, like, Frank would have benefited. Like, if someone was smart, they would have, after this, been like, what we should do is put him in one of those experimental prisons that, you know, like, yeah, you can run off into the wilderness and, like, yeah, you might make it, but... Or you could stay here in a much more comfortable setting and let's do productive things.
Yeah.
Kind of like on, Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale.
Yeah.
Or Abagnale. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
They give the criminal a purpose. They give him a job. They give him a purpose. Like, hey, use your smarts to help catch other people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and it's almost like a shame. It's like, you're so smart. I'm like, you could fucking work for NASA. It's like the 19...
Yeah. A waste. Like, just because he's a criminal. Like, there's reasons he's a criminal. It's not because he's inherently evil or broken or twisted.
I know.
Especially since he's not, like, a sadistic,
he's not a violent criminal. Yeah. That's the thing. I know. I'm
bored. He's bored. Challenge.
Oh my God, yeah. Tagline of these episodes: he's bored. They're bored.
Give him a challenge.
Yeah,
like make him useful. Like, don't just lock him up. Like, he's obviously intelligent and talented. Like, use it.
Yeah. It's
just another example of government waste.
I know. And like
waste of resources.
Government
loves to waste resources.
Oh, do they? I didn't notice. It's not like I work for the government right now. Okay, so they make a drill and they use it so they like just throw a raincoat over it to muffle the sound. They also use a piece of...
I love those raincoats, man.
Right, they're so multi-purpose. They also use a piece of, I'm going to say this word wrong, carborundum string. It is an abrasive wire used for fine grooving in machinery. Okay, great. That's all we need to know.
I have no idea what you're talking about, so.
Okay, it's just a wire that could help cut through bars, I think. They used both of those things and eventually, over the course of almost another 6 months, cut through the rivets that are holding the bars onto this thing. So, like, not only is he smart, he's also patient.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the key things there. It's
yeah.
like, you gotta do it, you gotta do it right.
Yeah.
And if it takes time, it takes time.
And, like,
they're prison, like, they've got time. Like, that is the one thing they have in excess in prison.
Yes. They have time and they have motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So meanwhile, during the 6-month period, they had been using their, quote, workshop to make a 14 by 6 foot raft out of 50 raincoats. They actually made 2 rafts. The larger one was 14 by 6. They stitched it together by hand, they stitched it together by hand. They sealed it with waterproof glue and possibly by sealing the seams with heat from the pipes. And they also made life vests in the same way based on a design that Frank had come across in a popular mechanics article. And speaking of Frank reading things, he had also been reading everything he could on tides and navigational hazards.
Yep.
Like, just...
I love this man.
I know! Like, ugh. Okay, so...
He is the epitome of where there's a will, there's a way.
Right? He's just like a... I don't know. This is such an incredible story.
Use what you got.
So, on June 11th of 1962, they made their escape. So, Alan had made some repairs to his hole a week earlier. There had been some nearby cell inspections, and he was worried that his cardboard grate was going to come loose and be discovered. So he had actually filled in some of his hole. Like, he had taken some of the cement and, like, remixed it and, like, packed it in. So when it came time for them to escape, he couldn't get his loose again. Which is why he is not counted as one of the ones who escapes, because he got left behind. So he's, like, struggling.
I'd be pissed.
Well, he's also why we know a lot of this stuff, because he snitched. Frank and John and Clarence told him, they were like, be quiet. I mean, like, don't be loud about it, but keep working and we'll meet you on the roof because we gotta go. Like, we can't do this for very long.
We're gonna go get everything ready.
Yeah. But they couldn't really wait that long, so they get up to the workshop, they gather their things, they get up onto the roof. They're actually, like, in the process of this whole thing, I think when they were getting up onto the roof, the cover thing made, like, a really loud noise, like a gust of wind hit it or something. And amazingly, like, they didn't get discovered. I think guards thought it was coming from somewhere else, or just thought it was a regular noise. But
there's probably lots of random noises.
Yeah, but nothing happened. So they get to the roof. From there, they somehow made their way to the ground without being seen by guard towers. People, we think, took a 50-foot kitchen vent pipe down to the ground. They climbed over a barbed wire fence. They inflated the raft with a concertina, like an accordion but smaller.
Okay.
And they had converted that.
Like a bellows.
Yeah. So they had stolen that from another inmate, and then they had modified it to be like a bellows. And then they launched their raft, and they headed out into the darkness. Alan eventually gave up. I think he eventually got his open, but it was like well after midnight, and he was like, I can't do this by myself. And he just went back to sleep.
Poor Alan.
I know. At 7:15 the following morning. So it was around, they think it was around 9 or 10 that night that they made their escape.
Shortly after lights out.
Yeah. 7:15 the following morning is when guards discovered that they were gone. Which, like, I wish I had been there for a guard to, like, you know, be like, wake up, Frank. And then the head rolls out. Which is why that piece of the nose is missing, by the way, because a guard shook it and it fell off the bed. Nice. So the FBI was immediately notified, and an extensive air, water, and land search was conducted over the next 10 days. Allen West fully cooperated with investigators in exchange for not being charged in, like,
basically,
don't
punish me more, don't add anything to my, like, just let me go on as if nothing ever happened.
Yeah. He would eventually finish serving his sentence in 1967.
He was only in for 10 years, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But he also was rearrested the same year that he was released for grand larceny. And then in 1972, he fatally stabbed an inmate in what possibly was a racist hate crime. So we don't feel that bad for Allen for not getting out. Yeah. And then he died in 1978 from acute peritonitis. So just to wrap up the Allen West end of this story, that's what happened to him. Okay. Meanwhile, back in 1962, investigators found an oar, a homemade oar, which I forgot to mention. They made those. A floating...
That seems like one of the least difficult things for them to make.
Not interesting to tell you how they made it. It was a stick with a paddle at the end. Yeah. They found that floating about 200 yards offshore from Alcatraz. They also found a bag made out of raincoats, like a small bag, near Angel Island, which was, I want to say, a couple miles away. In the bag, they found approximately 60 family photos, a list of names and addresses, and a receipt for a $10 money order from Alcatraz that had been made out to Clarence Anglin. So it was like Anglin family photos. Several days later, they found the shredded remains of the raft on the beach near the Golden Gate Bridge, followed by a deflated life jacket that was found about 50 yards offshore of Alcatraz. So things are like showing up kind of all over the place. But what they didn't find
were the 3 men.
Right. Were any bodies. This is giving Teddy Cole and Ralph Rowe vibes. To pull them back into the whole story. So prison officials blamed the, quote, debilitated condition of Alcatraz for the breakout. Warden Blackwell, who was the warden at the time...
I mean, yeah, the prison's old, but also dude's freaking smart.
Yeah. Oh, but they're never going to say that. No, God forbid. Warden Blackwell was quoted as saying, the concrete wasn't crumbling, but there was some erosion to it. Which the press was like, was there? They also told the press that the men had used spoons to dig out, but they neglected to mention the nail file attachment or the ingenious way that Frank had, like, welded the things together. Like, they're not going to tell them that Frank was...
Hence the, like, that's how that meme of digging out of prison with spoons was started. I always kind of wondered where that came from. Now I know.
Yeah, you need a nail file. They also...
an interesting welding technique.
Yeah, or a really smart person leading your group. They also insisted that there had been no, quote, willful negligence on the part of Alcatraz staff, although the guards who had been on duty that night were quietly suspended for 20 days without pay. And Associate Warden Dollison was appointed to a different prison 5 months later. They were like, we're going to low-key fire you. I mean, reappoint you. I mean, reassign
relocate.
You. Relocate. Whatever.
You work over there now.
You're not an Alcatraz person anymore. Although the FBI claimed that there were no reported thefts in the days following the breakout, which would indicate that the men hadn't made it to shore, because they were like, well, if they made it to shore, they'd have to, like, steal car and clothes and stuff. Yep. But there was none of that reported.
Except because it's not reported doesn't mean it's not happening.
Except there was a 1955 blue Chevrolet reported stolen in Marin County, which is just north of San Francisco. That was reported stolen on June 12th. A similar car was reported to police for running another car off the road in Stockton, which is just east, like later the same day. And in that report, it said there were 3 men in the car. And although the FBI did interview all the family and known associates of Frank Morris and the Anglins, there wasn't no trace of them on the mainland. And so this next part comes directly from the FBI investigative files, which I will say are incredibly disorganized and hard to read. I feel like they took the route of, like, just because we have to put everything on here does not mean we're going to make it easy for you to read or easy to find things. They are the worst photocopies I've ever seen, and there is no rhyme or reason to the order that there is anything, whatever.
Government.
Yes. And as my first example...
As someone who has had to, like, sift through and pore over government, like, I've had, like, literal paper files because they've only just started digitizing things now. And that's when the online database feels like working. Like, you type in your search and it just, like, I'm thinking. And, like, I've tried everything. Sometimes it's like, it's going to work today. And other days, it's not working.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's no organization to it. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah. Also with these, a lot of stuff is redacted or censored. So for example, on June 13th, I'm going to read you the entirety of this file. Quote, "The following investigation was conducted by special agents, redacted, and redacted on June 13th, 1962, followed by 4 redacted lines. As she answered the phone, the individual on the other end of the line advised that he was John Anglin." The rest of the document is redacted. It's like 2.5 paragraphs of redacted material. Feels like it was important, but who am I? Not the FBI. Okay. On June 18th, a 73-year-old woman in Lincoln, Nebraska was allegedly tied up in her home by a man who claimed to have escaped from Alcatraz. She described him as desperate and hungry. He told her that if he was caught, he would get, quote, 120 days on number 1 diet and 5 years extra time. He also mentioned the chaplain at Alcatraz by name, and then he stole a watch, a diamond ring, and $75 from her. Warden Blackwell did note that the number 1 diet, which I think was bread and water, hadn't been used for several years, and that the chaplain mentioned had not worked at Alcatraz. He worked for a different prison. And when shown pictures of the Alcatraz escapees, the woman said that none of them were the person who attacked her. My guess for this one is that whoever this person was maybe was escaped from somewhere else, but was using Alcatraz as like a, I'm really dangerous.
Yeah.
I was sent to, yeah, like, whatever. Also on June 18th, Warden Blackwell received a postcard at the prison, postmarked from San Francisco, and it said...
Please tell me it's Frank taunting him.
It said, quote, "Haha, we made it." And it was signed Frank, John, and Clarence. Allegedly, so all of the signatures appeared to be in different handwritings. The handwriting of the main text apparently appeared to be in Clarence's handwriting. According to the FBI, they did handwriting analysis and determined it was not Clarence's handwriting. And I guess there weren't fingerprints on it. Or if there were, I didn't read far enough into the 9,000 pages, because right after this document where they're like, we're going to send this off for fingerprints, the next thing is like, 18 pages of something completely unrelated, because why would you group related information together? I would love to think that this postcard came from them, because...
Oh, me too.
Hilarious to just say, haha, we made it.
I would have gone with something a little bit more snarky and been like, thanks for the stay. Or thanks for the stay, 1 star.
I feel like maybe Clarence wrote it and then just had everyone else sign it.
Yeah.
That wasn't a Frank. Frank didn't come up with, haha, we made it.
I mean, just, again, different types of intelligence. Like, just because he's, weld spoons and nail files together smart doesn't mean he's a wordsmith.
He maybe doesn't have the comedy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Okay. On June 27th, a woman in Evansville, Indiana, met 2 men in a bar while drinking around 5:30 or 6. She said they were both poorly dressed. She described the first man as being around 38, around 6 feet tall, 150 pounds, with light brown or sandy hair. The second man was around 25, 5'6", 140 to 150 pounds, black hair that was long and combed straight back, and pale and unshaven. They began talking. They paid for her drinks and for theirs with bills from a roll of cash that they just had on them. And then they all went to another bar together. They were just like, let's go to a different bar.
Interesting, because the description of the two guys, like, one of them, like, kind of, you know, not a lot, but, like, sure. But the one that has more, I'm just like, doesn't sound that attractive. Like, black,
yeah, I know,
slick-backed hair is long and a little scraggly.
Yeah, pale and unshaven.
Yeah.
It's not the
like,
best.
I don't think I'm drinking with them, and if I am, I don't think I'm going to another bar with them.
I mean, they're buying her drinks.
Yeah, I mean,
full disclosure.
This is coming from a married woman of,
true,
you know, many years now, so.
Many years.
Like, the idea of drinking with some dude and, like, going to another bar, like, just because he's buying my drinks, I'm like, no, that is not for me.
Sounds dangerous, too.
Mm-hmm. Way too dangerous.
Full disclosure, this woman does end up in prison herself. I don't know what for, but she does. Which, no reflection on her. I mean, it could have been for stealing watermelons, for all I know. Okay, so they're at this other bar, and the men ask her if she knows where they could get some ID papers. And she's like, why do you need those? And they're like, well, we just escaped from a penitentiary and we're on the run. And she said she was skeptical at this point. She's like, which one did you escape from? And they said, Alcatraz. And she's like, I've never heard of that. Where's that from? I don't know. And they said anyone could escape from Alcatraz if they knew how to swim. And then they also told her that there had been 3 of them, but one didn't make it. And then they asked if she knew a place where they could shave and clean up. And so she says sure, and takes them somewhere to someone's house. I don't really know. And then while they're there, the first man shows her his cut up feet from walking like barefoot for a long distance. And then also shows her scars on his back from where he's been like beaten in prison. And this is the point in the story where I was thinking, like, has this turned into like a smut plot? Because she's like met these 2 strangers in a bar, and now they're in someone's home. And the first one,
like a white shoes.
Yeah, like the first one, who's like not the kind of creepy one, is like disrobing and showing her all of his. I don't know.
Just starting to be a little creepy,
but also kind of hot.
Maybe.
I don't know. For her, she said this is when she said, no, thank you. I don't want to be involved anymore. Mm-hmm. So I guess for her it was creepy and not whatever. But then the guys are like, come with us.
No, thank you.
They literally said, run away with us. Come with us to Mount Vernon, Indiana. What a tantalizing, tempting.
I would go.
And she said, no, thank you. I have to appear in court tomorrow morning. And they literally, I know, they literally said, no, you don't. Just skip out on that. Come hang out with us. But she was a good law-abiding citizen now and said,
despite the fact that she had done something that required a court appearance.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, they went off with her friend or something. So she has like reported this to the FBI, and when the FBI now shows her the pictures, she identified the first guy, so the guy who has disrobed for her, as Clarence Anglin, and the second unshaven pale one as Frank Morris. Which means that John died in her story, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he died during the escape attempt. It could have been...
True.
You know, they could have been trying to, like, steal someone's car or something. Yeah. And, you know, he might have died in that. Like, an altercation or something.
True. Also, this is the only version in which he dies. So, the next sighting is July 2nd, in which Assistant Special Agent DeFord of Tampa, Florida. I don't know what he's a special agent of.
That's just what they're called.
What are called? Cops?
Yeah, if you work for the FBI, you're a special agent.
Oh, okay.
That's just their title.
Oh, okay. So he's an assistant one. So he's not a full one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know, like, the different, like, ranks or whatever with it. But, like, you know, you watch Bones or something. Special Agent Seeley Booth.
Oh, okay. I was thinking the assistant part threw me off. Okay, so an FBI agent in Tampa saw a, quote, dark red or maroon Corvair automobile.
I wonder if special agents are the field agents.
I don't know. Anyways.
Somebody who works for the FBI or is familiar with their structure, let us know.
Oh, hey, how about the FBI agents that listen to that are like watching our phones and...
That's NSA.
Oh, never mind. Okay, so he sees...
They want our secrets.
He sees a dark red car driving down the road with 2 men inside, and he was familiar with the Alcatraz case, and he said the driver of the car looked like it could be John Anglin, who is not dead. And so he turned around and so he could pass the car again, and got a second look and still thought it could be John. And apparently this was significant because there was a woman, name redacted, living in Tampa that the brothers had been associated with, and this is my favorite quote of the episode, quote, John Anglin was at one time arrested in a compromising position with her.
Now that's a smut prompt.
I know, I need to know more. What were they doing?
What do you think they were doing?
I know, but why were they arrested in that position? Like, what were the circumstances? Why are you walking in on that and arresting someone? Can you not?
I mean, maybe it was one of those, like, okay, we have, you know, his location. He's at this motel. We're just waiting on backup, and then we can go in and arrest him.
Still, that's such to put that in the file.
Again, as someone who's pored over a lot of government documents, there are some that are very entertaining. There is one that I'm like, holy crap, this reads like a friggin' soap opera. Like, I would watch this TV show. I mean, it was bad because ultimately the farm owner was speaking very, like, threateningly to this government official who was there, like, you know, in official capacity doing this inspection, just, like, asking some questions and, you know, trying to figure out what was going on. And she literally wrote in the file, she's like, I no longer felt comfortable being there by myself and left and, you know, had to return the next day with another, you know, with a coworker, just so she was no longer, and she's like, you know, officials should not, you know, like, basically, nobody else go to this farm alone. I mean, she's a feisty woman, but she's also real short. Yeah. And this also...
And she's also a woman in the world.
This farm owner had his doctor send in a note. Basically, they intentionally released millions of gallons of hog shit into the river.
Great.
And lied about it.
His doctor sent in a note for him.
And so obviously they were getting fined and, like, getting, you know, penalized for all of this. And he had his doctor send in a note that, like, obviously this wasn't intentional. Like, he was in the hospital at the time recovering from, like, heart surgery, and his son-in-law, who is the operator in charge of the farm, just is recovering from back surgery, so he's been out. Meanwhile, his wife, aka the farm owner's daughter, just had a miscarriage, and so, like, this family's really, basically, this poor family's been going through it, and, like, yeah, all of that sucks. I'm very sorry for these people as individuals, but these people as, you know, the people responsible for polluting our environment, no, you're a bunch of buttheads.
Can none of them read, and none of them couldn't read the big lever that said hog shit into the river and pulled the wrong one?
Basically, is there's without getting too into my Roman Empire, it's a big lagoon. So imagine, like, just a big hole in the ground, like a big nasty swimming pool.
Gross.
And there's pipes and hoses that go and slurp up this poop because it's liquid. It's not just poop. It's urine. It's blood. It's pus. It's funk.
Ew. I was looking.
These are not happy conditions that these pigs are living in, and they're just all living above these slatted floors. Aww. So, like, basically they just poop and it goes through the slats. They go to the bathroom, it goes through the slats. If they get into a fight or have any kind of issue, or, like, they have whatever, it goes through the slats. And then it goes into the pit. And then all of this is mixed with some water, but it's still mostly just poop and whatnot. And is then sprayed through basically sprinklers onto fields. It's used as fertilizer. Uh-huh. I mean, you've seen it. Right. I guarantee you've seen it.
Gross.
Next time you're, like, driving through the country and you see these, like, sprayers spraying on fields, that's not water. And,
okay.
Also, make sure your windows are up. Like, obviously they probably would be because it smells really bad. So, yeah, they're spraying onto the fields. Well, somebody took a hose from one of the sprayers, detached it, angled it towards the woods, and they thought they were just going to flood the woods, and no one would be the wiser, except there was, like, this, like, ditched and, like, ephemeral stream that all of the waste found its way to this ditch that brought it straight to the river. And, like, it was pretty obvious that, like, you could see where the hose had been, like, dragged.
Yeah.
And where it was sitting and where it moved.
Jeez.
And it's, like, a whole big drama. So sorry about that tangent, everyone. But,
no.
Like, the owner, you know, when she came back with a coworker, he, you know, shoved this gasket in her face that she said it obviously looked like he had just cut this rubber gasket. And he's like, here, this broke. And this is what happened. Like, this broke on the sprayer, and that's why the hose detached, and that's how all of this waste. And it's like, okay, but if that happened, when we originally got here, someone should have said, oh, yeah, we noticed one of our hoses, you know, their gasket broke, and we fixed it, and everything's fine now.
Yeah.
So, like, there should have been a record. There should have either been the hose still, like, they should have been able to find the broken thing on their first investigation.
Yeah.
Or there should be a record of it broken and being repaired. There wasn't until conveniently several days later.
Yeah.
So.
Yay.
Bad people doing bad things.
Oh, man.
And then lying about it to the government officials. And threatening them. It's a whole saga. Sorry.
Oh, man. I was trying to remember how we got on that, and then I read John Anglin was arrested in a compromising position with her. That's going to be the start of my November novel writing thing.
NaNoWriMo.
Yeah. But I'm going to also use the smutty plot that whatever. I'm going to use FBI files for my plots. Okay. So, the one big prevailing theory that was also supposed to be the main point of this, that is just kind of the end point, is that there are at least some members of the Anglin family that believe that the three men made it to shore and then made their way to Brazil, where they lived out the remainder of their lives. One of the reasons for this is because the family friend named Fred Breezy, who had apparently grown up with the Anglin brothers, gave the family a photograph that is in your dossier that allegedly was taken of John and Clarence in 1975. I made that picture as big as I possibly could.
He looks like Beetlejuice.
I know. But, like, compare it to the original mugshots of them.
There's no way. Like, there's no way you could compare or tell.
Well, so according to Fred, this is a picture of them. That's John on the right and Clarence on the left, standing near Sao Paulo, Brazil. They're standing next to a large termite mound, possibly on a farm that they own, because the story was that they
have the know-how for working a farm.
Yeah, they eventually got a farm. So in 2022, the show Expedition Unknown covered this aspect of it. I understand that is a show, but I'm going to tell you what they did. So they spoke to one of the Anglin brothers' nephew who had this photo. And I loved this guy because he was just like, I'm 100% certain that they got off of the island and that they survived. And this is how I know. So he suggested that instead of just paddling across the bay, that they actually tethered their raft to a boat using a 125-foot electrical cord that was also missing from stuff. Apparently, the last boat that left from Alcatraz left around 11:15 that night. I don't really know how that worked in with their plan. His idea is
might have been just let's jump on this while we can.
Yeah.
Like, it might not have been part of the plan.
So his thought was that they would just tie the boat off and then get pulled to shore. And so Expedition Unknown was like, well, let's see if that's possible. So they didn't like homemake a raft, but they tied a raft to a tugboat and tugged it. And like, they were like, well, it wasn't fun and it wasn't easy, but it's possible. And like, some of us fell off and had to get back on, and like, you know, it was cold and miserable, but we made it. So like, plausible, possible. They also suggested that this theory is a little weird, that the brothers had been drug runners for a mobster named Mickey Cohen before they had gotten arrested. I don't know, because all that I read was about them being like small-time criminals with the breaking and entering. Also, this part of the theory suggests that Mickey Cohen had funded their escape for some reason. I don't really know why he would do that. But in this theory, he also arranged for a pickup boat to come pick them up part of the way through.
I don't like that one. It's too much.
Yeah.
Especially just for some drug runners.
I agree.
Like, they're essentially mules.
Yeah.
Like, you're not sticking your neck out or spending money or doing anything for mules.
Also, if you're... Like, one thing I learned is, like, the mob boss doesn't make any money while he's in jail. Al Capone was treated like shit in Alcatraz. Like, you don't get special privileges while you're in there. So, like, your drug mules aren't going to be making you more money while you're in there.
Yeah. And also, like, if they're running drugs, that means they need to be going to multiple locations.
Yeah.
A lot. Like, we have a neighbor that Shelton is convinced used to run drugs in the 70s. But he was a pilot, I think, or... yeah, he basically was back and forth between here and, you know, the States and South America a lot of times.
Is it the one that I know about?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Like, we have absolutely no evidence. Like, this is a very nice man with a nice big dog, and it's just, you know, like, some of the stories, like, Shelton and he would go to, you know, they would be at the dog park letting our dogs play. And he would tell stories about, like, oh, yeah, no, my buddy called me up and said he had, you know, tickets to this thing. And so I just jumped on a plane. Like, just talking about, like, his, you know, the good old days.
Yeah.
And Shelton's like, I bet he used to run drugs or something. Like, mostly joking.
Yeah.
But there's a definite possibility that he could have done this.
Yeah.
But, anyhow.
Yeah. Well, one piece of evidence that I forgot to mention was that on the night of, I guess the morning of June 12th, an illegal boat was seen in the bay by a San Francisco police officer around 1 a.m. This was reported to the FBI. This police officer said, I saw this boat. It lingered for a few minutes, and then it went off like towards the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. I cannot remember anything right now. He reported it to the FBI, and the FBI was like, whatever, we don't care. Yeah. So, I mean, that could have also been, like, a friend that was not a mobster picking them up. Also, according to the Expedition Unknown episode, an eyewitness in Monteiro Lobato, Brazil, remembered 3 Americans around, like, the 1960s hiding out in the mountains under a natural rock shelter. And this person said that the local sheriff eventually went up to check on them because it was like such a remote area, and actually brought them food and was like, not here to arrest you, just like,
you okay?
Are you okay? And so, of course, because it's a dramatic TV show, they like hiked up there. And again, I don't know how much of this was like for TV, but what they alleged to uncover up there, because they like went digging around with their metal detectors, was a lighter, some farming implements, and then a 1951 U.S. penny that was like buried up there. So if that part is true, like if they didn't just plant that stuff, it is kind of interesting why a U.S. penny would be like up in the random mountains in Brazil. Mm-hmm. So the Brazil photograph, has been looked at by several experts. One U.S. Marshal named Michael Dyke says that he doesn't think the measurements of the men in the photos match those of the Anglins. Mm-hmm. However, in 2020, an Irish creative agency and AI specialist analyzed the picture and concluded that it likely was the Anglin brothers. They're wearing sunglasses, so, it's hard to tell. In 2013, the San Francisco Police Department received a letter allegedly written by John Anglin. In the letter, it claimed that Frank had died in 2008 and Clarence had died in 2011. And John was saying that he was dying of cancer and wanted to negotiate his surrender in exchange for medical treatment. I don't think any action was actually ever taken because they couldn't determine the legitimacy of the letter. So...
I mean, at this point, why?
Yeah.
The postcard that the warden received, I could see that being a joke or a hoax or something. The photograph, yeah. Maybe a joke or a hoax or a, really poor taste prank for the family. But all these years later.
I know. And, what's the worst that you can do is, give a dying man's treatment.
Yeah. Or even, entertain the possibility of...
Yeah. It's...
treatment. Why... if I'm dying of cancer, I'm not gonna look up and be like, who is about my age that's, an escaped criminal...
Yeah, what leverage can I,
that I can leverage
manipulate
for medical treatment?
In 2003... Mythbusters did the episode on Alcatraz where they successfully built a raft using only the materials and techniques that was available to the inmates. It's actually a very entertaining episode.
I want to watch that one.
It's on Discovery. Well, it's on HBO, which is how I watch Mythbusters these days. So they made the raft, and then Jamie and Adam and then some other guy that they guessed was an approximate weight match made it across the bay. So, between that and the other raft experiment, I'm if you guys are doing this, I mean, maybe that wasn't on the first try. I don't know. It's TV, but, it's not like you're doing 100 experiments and one of them is successful. Yeah. Come on. It's not...
Also, 2 of the men were very strong swimmers.
Yeah, so... I'm not unconvinced that this is, and I also really think that the whole, it's impossible was, so, hammered into the inmates just to make them believe
don't even
it.
Try, don't even bother.
That it's okay, but it's not. And then I'm going to end on this because I think it's a perfect way to end. The very last escape attempt from Alcatraz happened on December 16th of 1962, which was exactly 25 years after Teddy Cole and Ralph Rowe left the island. I didn't come up with that. That was written in the book, okay? All right. So, John Paul Scott, who was 35, and Darrell Lee Parker, who was 31, escaped from I have storage room written, but I also read that it was maybe a bathroom window. So they climbed down a drain pipe. They climbed up a drain pipe to the roof. They climbed up to a blind spot on the roof. And then they used a stolen extension cord. Extension cords are very in right now. And to climb down to shore.
Basically where they rappel.
Yeah, where they didn't have to go over a fence. So they just get down to the water. 15 minutes later, it's discovered that they're missing. Almost immediately... Parker is found on Little Alcatraz, which is 100 yards away. He has a broken ankle. He's not going anywhere. Scott was found several hours later on the beaches of Fort Point, 3 miles away. He was suffering from exhaustion and hypothermia, but he was alive, and he made it across the bay and officially proved that it is possible to escape from Alcatraz by way of water. I mean, he did, they found him and he, was hospitalized and returned to the prison.
Well, obviously.
But
he did it.
He did it.
Yeah. if he had gone not in December. Then again, like, I don't know how much the water temperatures really fluctuate. I don't think it's much.
I don't think it's very much.
So.
Yeah. And then 3 months after this, on March 21st of 1963, Attorney General Robert Kennedy officially closed Alcatraz. Which means that I am officially closing our 3-part series on Alcatraz.
Until we actually go.
Until we actually go. And until I bombard everyone / just patrons with, and Katy, with bonus episodes.
I'm here for it.
Thank you, everyone, for
sticking through all 3 episodes of Hannah's new personality.
It really, truly is my new personality, and it's everyone's problem now. I've got 2 more books on my eBay cart. Anyways.
And maybe a stolen library book soon.
Oh, yeah, I gotta remember. I'm gonna call and ask if I can replace it with another one. That's such a good idea.
If you want to see pictures and mugshots and whatnot from tonight's episode, I say tonight, I don't know when you're listening, this episode, you should check out our Instagram and Facebook at The Tales We Tell Podcast. If you want to see photos but don't do the social media, check out our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. If you want to support us and get yourself some sweet, sweet swag, you can shop our Redbubble store, search The Tales We Tell. And if you want to support us but you don't need the stuff except maybe some delicious, more Alcatraz-y flavored bonus content, on top of early access, commercial-free listening, and sometimes some love notes and stickers and goodies, you can become patrons at patreon.com. Search The Tales We Tell. And until next week, bye.
Bye.